Okay. Good morning, everyone. We're going to open the Eastham Zoning Task Force meeting today. This meeting will be video recorded and broadcast over Local Access Channel 8 and through the town's website at www.eastham-ma.gov. Good morning, everyone. Clarification, Paul, do we have minutes from the last meeting?
We certainly do.
We do.
Yeah, she said we
Two
could,
days.
yeah, very,
Okay.
so.
No, you probably sent them, but
They were emailed out to
we
everyone.
were talking about the,
Probably sent them.
I did send
Yeah,
them.
no, I think
In fact, Kevin
I love how we start this meeting.
thanked me for sending
Like
them.
we waited for the recording.
But just in case some people don't have them.
No, I haven't, thank you for that.
okay.
His,
We should make
Tom,
this,
did you?
we should get it on the record that we're just teasing.
My email. This is my senior moments, and you should have emailed them yesterday. Then I would have been on top of it. No, in any event, has everyone had a chance to review the minutes?
Yes.
Okay. Can I get a motion to accept the minutes of the November 18th meeting?
So moved.
Second?
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much. Okay.
Put those minutes to rest.
Yes, we have a full agenda, but I do believe we have, a member of the public, Velma Decker, who has, submitted quite a bit of information online, as well as, Paul, I believe there's a letter or statement that has been supplied to the committee. So maybe what we would do is, before we dive into our full meeting, maybe I could ask Velma if she would like to take, I think the standard public presentation is 3 minutes. Could she take 3 minutes to, we have all your material, Velma, but if we could take 3 minutes maybe for you to summarize your position, and then we can have a discussion. So does that work?
See if she's off mute.
Velma, I think you probably need to unmute yourself if you want to speak.
Okay, I think that's done. Are we good now?
Yes, we are.
Okay, well, I'll summarize the letter that I wrote for why I've submitted recommendations. And basically my personal history with the site plan review process was within working with my cousin Sarah Reynolds at 180 Shirtlift. And we really oppose the size and scale of that project. And from what I've heard, just anecdotally, and everyone I've met, that's really a large building. And it's been something that I'm not so sure people would be happy that they approved. I can't be sure, but I mean, that's a really big project. And then there's other issues that, again, I've run into personally, where you have contractors who are excavating ground and really dramatically altering the topography prior to sometimes permitting or prior to construction, and without any real consideration of the impact of these changes to the topography, and also limitations on retaining walls. Now, when I was personally impacted by both of these situations, I did a pretty, I'd say, substantive study of the zoning bylaws in both cities in Massachusetts and on the Cape. And of course, the Cape character is considerably different, but I think that the resources some of these big cities have and some of the problems they ran into are common to here. And what I also observed in looking at our own bylaws is that people, I felt, had very few concrete guidelines for making determinations on bulk and scale. So there's wording in the bylaws now that say things like we should discourage, you should encourage, but nothing that says you can't build a Taj Mahal or you can't build a giant industrial building on a residential property. There's very little concrete guidance. So I found that across the Cape, some people have different means of adjusting the height and scale of buildings. And sometimes they become contradictory, which I believe they have a little bit in Eastham, where you have setback requirements, but then those are really sometimes overridden by these concepts of mean elevation, natural elevation, and all that eventually. So in a package, which I hope people will have time to review because it was a substantive effort, is to look at different means of somehow moderating some of these excesses that I believe the whole town has seen, where you have more concrete means of measuring setback, more concrete reference frames for measuring setback, which Eastham has been really using to limit the scale of buildings, measurement of building height. And I think most significantly, I submitted a proposed section, it could be an addendum, on retaining walls, because I discovered that the whole zoning bylaw set is completely silent on retaining walls, but those are a big part of how you essentially hardscape a lot, how you put a lot or a driveway on any particular situation. So I do hope that people appreciate the fact that I've loved the town of Eastham for 50 years. I feel, unfortunately, personally harmed by some of the things that have occurred, but I really hope that the suggestions I made in my larger package will be something you can use to stimulate some discussions and also perhaps amendments to the zoning ordinances. So thank you for the opportunity to submit my correspondence and also have the opportunity to speak.
Velma, thank you very much. I did have a chance to review your analysis. I haven't studied it. I did read it. I do want to say that you've done quite a bit of analysis. It's sort of similar to the approaches we take when we're dealing with an issue, is to kind of look at other bylaws and really see where ours may need improvements. Let me just give you a little sense of timing where we are as a committee. We reconvene historically in August after a short summer break, negotiate or discuss and reach consensus with the select board of a series of things we will evaluate. We do our research through the fall and early winter with really final proposals coming out in early February. And then we do public hearings February, March. And then the select board will ultimately vote whether to put things on the agenda for town meeting in May. That is the typical cycle. What we have discussed at the committee is that cycle does not necessarily give us enough time to do all the analysis we want. So there are certain short-term things that we're going to try to do this fall that we think we have enough information and research, but we have proposed that instead of taking a summer break, that once this report comes out, we are going to continue our work in the spring of this year, during the months of March, April, May, June, so that we can get more substantively involved. The reason I'm telling you all of this timeline is that we have been looking at issues of design guidelines and design criteria, et cetera. And that is a big issue. You have raised issues around, clear cutting and excavation, and there's a host of other design issues. We will probably need to come back in the spring to continue this research. So what I would say to you is, at the point that we take this up and we're going to the next level, I can assure you that the issues that you've raised about elevation and retaining walls and any other issue, I will be sure that they're on the table as we discuss and review design guidelines for proposals, which honestly probably will come out the following year. So I don't know if that's helpful for you, but I did want to give you.
And I'll encourage folks to look at what Chatham and Dennis have done. Chatham's really the only one that's looked at retaining walls at all, and that's where I got a lot of the background for my recommendations there on sort of scale of retaining walls. Needham, Massachusetts, and Wellesley also had good guidelines, so that's where that came from. And Dennis also on the way they're measuring setbacks and height and distinguishing between natural elevation and some of these other things. So appreciate your attention to those things and also your consideration of what I put forward as like a first stab. Thank you so much.
No, thank you for your work. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Donna.
Anyone else? Comments?
Thank you.
No,
Okay,
thank you, yes.
thank you. Okay. All right. No more comments. Why don't we get to, Paul, how do we want to, do this? Did you want to start with the inclusionary zoning?
Sure.
Okay. And I guess just, we have today, and we just want to be sure you've given us drafts of the inclusion, or a memo around the inclusionary zoning. You've given us drafts regarding the, code enforcement officer. And then we also we had quite a bit of information that came through on site coverage and those issues. So
And Jackie has more info that she can share on site coverage.
on site coverage. So let me get a sense of the group today. In 2 weeks, we will have the consultant on inclusionary zoning as well as town council here to talk about this. I think there's some early conversations we should have about inclusionary, but we could probably have them in a shorter period of time, maybe get some of our questions and concerns on the table if there are any. And then, again, we're going to come back to this in 2 weeks. So maybe this could be, I don't know, 15, 20 minutes we do this. Site coverage is a real big issue. And again, I don't know if the, which is going to take a lot of time, can going through this, the code enforcement officer, is this relatively quick?
Yeah, it's quick as you want.
Well, I'm trying to kind of move us along. Okay, all right. Well, let's start with the inclusionary. And Carolyn sent me some comments on the inclusionary information, so I can share those with you. But Paul, why don't you start?
So like I put in the memo, our consultant is working on kind of global cleaning up the bylaw, making it more usable. There's a lot of little adjustments that I think will be good. But I think the central thing is we've talked about is, do we want to have this kind of carve out for smaller scale projects that only yield 1, 2, 3, however many inclusionary units? And some question, and Mary and I were on a call last week with the consultant. So kind of what would be helpful for the consultant is some feedback early from this group on, do we want, well, I guess we have to wrestle with what's the right number, and I guess just people's feelings on, is it 1, 2, 3, 5, whatever. And right now in the bylaw, we have, when you trigger inclusionary units to be created, they have to be either deed restricted affordable, 80% below, or workforce, but at least half of them have to be affordable. So if you're only triggering one, that one has to be affordable. If you get two, you have the choice, you can do. And part of what we're trying to do is the real hang up, if you will, with when you create these inclusionary around small scale projects, our bylaw is set up to basically force those units to be on the state SHI list. And with that comes a lot of time, money, and expense, to be honest. And so we're kind of wrestling with what's a good balance. So our bylaw, like I said, is set up to go through all the hoops if you have to comply with the SHI. Do we want to have this carve out to basically say those for a certain number below, we're not going to force the developer to say you got to do everything to have it on the SHI? Do we want to be comfortable with, yes, we want some protections, we want to create a unit that would have certain protections, but those could be locally designed protections, deed restrictions, so forth. And it just cuts out a lot of the state requirements. So that's kind of a policy discussion on a face. Do we want to kind of be comfortable going without on some SHI, losing out on some possible SHI units? Assuming we are there, the next thing is, do we want these to be affordable? Some aspect, or do we want them to be workforce? I guess the easiest, I would say the easiest, but a quicker, maybe easier way is if we just said, we want the carport is gonna be, we're not making you put on the SHI, we're not gonna get any credit for them, but we want them to be workforce. That kind of eliminates any paperwork or, we have our own things. So that's kind of like, I'm saying easy, I'm not trying to sway you this way, but it just, we can basically do whatever we want. We can come up with any kind of structure and if we want to say it's important that we do want some of these small units to be captured as affordable, we can do that, but then we have to come up with a structure of what is the appropriate deed restriction language, the appropriate protections that we want. We can come up with that as all, kind of locally sourced information, but that's really what, from the consultant's perspective, they were looking for feedback of, if we want to capture affordable units, they're going to come up with a scheme of like, here's some templates of things and requirements. Workforce is just a lot. There's not really anything, it'd be probably a simple deed restriction saying, keep it to workforce up to 120%. So that's kind of the key. Am I missing anything?
So workforce is 120% of AMI and minimum of how many months rented per year?
Well,
That's a separate legal issue. Yeah.
I think based on everything else we've done, we would be looking for year-round rentals
There.
for workforce.
Now that we've-
up to 120. Well, that's a question too, is I think we could probably set our own rate. The standard is 120% for workforce. But that's again, something within our control. If we say we want workforce to be something else, we could establish.
Yeah, you're thinking of as Northeastern gets developed and somebody wants to add 2 or 3 units above them. And they only need somebody for 8 months when they're open. That to me is workforce housing. I know it's seasonal housing, but do we make a distinction between seasonal workforce and year-round workforce?
Well, in the current bylaw, we do, and we do actually.
Yep.
Allow for that. So yes, seasonal.
Season's already in there.
And just to get some ground points on, when we're talking about the SHI, that's what we need to get to a 10% affordable in the
Yes.
town to avoid
40B.
40B projects in fact. Currently, we're at 3.5 or 3.6.
Yeah.
So we're saying that we'd have to triple the amount of affordable housing for us to get this.
To get a 10%.
Well, yeah, but to get us to relieve the issue, the concern we have is that 40B projects could come in and we lose our authority to manage those. That's one of the reasons we want to get to 10%, in addition to having just more housing in general. What's the likelihood that we ever get there as a seasonal community, out here on the end of the Cape?
Well, every other seasonal community is getting there. We're not.
Who's there?
P-Town. I mean, if you,
Say 10%?
yeah, if you look at we are an outlier on the Outer Cape. We are a massive outlier.
So would we be potentially susceptible to getting that 40B project?
Oh, we will be for decades. This is not something that's going to go
Well,
away.
I think that, so P-Town is there, Orleans is there.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there are other towns that are
They're
there,
there.
but those towns have gotten large multi-unit projects done over a number of years. And Orleans is a little bit different. If you go to Orleans has a lot of older developments that have been on the books for a while, so that are probably not in the current mold of what we would be doing, but they've so they're there. I think they get a lot of different types of projects that probably most towns wouldn't bring forward now that are.
Yeah, I wasn't pushing away from not putting stuff into the SHI, but I'm getting at when you look at what Matt Cole did, that seems to be excessive for one unit to go through all that process. He seems to have done it as a good deed to see how the process works. But if we're doing one unit or 2 units at a time, that seems to be.
Well, he's doing that in other towns too. I mean, he's trying to figure out this end of the business because he philosophically does a lot of other people.
When you got to Eastham, we found Eastham the most onerous of all of them.
Like the recent one he did in Chatham wasn't even really triggering any inclusionary. In order to do the project, he needed to go to the ZBA to get a special permit for another component of the project. And they worked it out that as part of a special permit condition, they would have this affordable unit, and really it was just a pretty simple deed restriction that could put on the property. So that's why when he came to Eastham, he was a little overwhelmed, because he was just like, this was like two meetings and I was done. So we were trying to fit it into this whole structure of this inclusionary. So
So why was Eastham more onerous? That was SHI is a statewide set of guidelines, right?
it is. It's not, so it's not necessary that our bylaw is set up to create SHI units. And when you do that, you are locked into adherence to all of the state requirements and regulations and procedures and everything. So that's why.
Right, but are we more onerous once you get on the SHI side versus these other towns that Matt was
No,
saying?
We're not getting more onerous, we're just getting requirements for affordability. We have a threshold that after 4 units, you have affordability.
Okay.
Where Chatham's threshold is 10.
Okay, that's.
So just the direct
Okay.
comparison,
Yeah.
right? So we hit, if you're 5 or more,
Yeah.
you're now doing that workload where Chatham and some other towns are at 10.
I want to communicate a little bit what Carolyn has said, but and I'll elaborate. We've sort of always positioned that we're looking at the town plans to see what are the town's plans and goals, and how do we do the regulatory support for this. We have, the intent of this was to get at the large number of folks that are 80% below the median. And this was sort of a compromise kind of piece of bylaw where every other one, we realize there's both workforce and low-income housing that need to be developed in this town. From my perspective, I don't know of a single affordable housing project that's being contemplated on this town at all. And when I start looking at this is just going to be a backdoor way of not doing any affordable, period. And that's my real concern. I also have concern, and it was raised by the inclusionary zoning consultant, and I really think we need to look at this, is that there's issues of fair housing. We have found a sort of loopholes in laws that is allowing us to get away from all of the fair housing regulations. And I don't know if this is going to stand the test. And I really think before we go out the gate, we need a lot of legal support here, because this is just a workaround of not having affordability. And affordability is not meaning everything is affordable. I mean, most of the projects that I'm seeing in Orleans and Chatham, they're like a third market, a third workforce, and a third affordable. And we are just cutting out the affordable in this law. And this inclusionary zoning is the only mandate we have in town that puts any teeth behind affordability. So I took my positions and Carolyn's positions. But I really think before we go really much further, I really think we need a solid legal opinion, because I am very concerned that this seems like an elegant workaround. And even we're going to end up with a lot of market rate housing and a few workforce housing, and we will have done nothing to address the affordability issue in this town. And it's real. I mean, again, Carolyn can explain this in the housing production plan, but.
Has there been any conversations with the state on this type of situation where, yes, we kind of create 1, 2, or 3 affordable units, but it's a real burden on the developer and it would basically discourage it because of the cost. But how sensitive is the state to the idea that, if it's an affordable unit, we should be counting it?
That's why you have publicly subsidized projects that get public subsidy in there to offset the developer so that they can make it work. And we are adverse to getting publicly subsidized projects because we don't want the rules, which are basically 30% affordability. So, we've set up our own political situation that is putting us in this situation. I mean, these developments happen all over the Cape. They're complicated, yeah, but I mean, there's developers Orleans is a perfect example of this stuff happening.
We're just not doing it. And I think there's bigger policy reasons rather than just the mechanics of affordable housing.
And to my point earlier about the MAT one, because you just mentioned allowing, two or three. I was thinking of the one, possibly 2 units. I'm thinking of the 4 or 5 units, or from 5 to 6 to 7 units, where we try to figure out a way to make it easier. But I think that if someone's building 10 units or more, I definitely think they should have visionary, should include affordability.
If they're building 10 units or more, which means at
Oh, I
least
understand
2
what
of them
you're saying.
should be affordable.
Yeah, my first point was about that in between, that first step. Where I
No.
think that's a large step for someone to take when they want to build that 5th unit, or they want to build 6 units and they want to make it more affordable. But by the time you're building 10 units, I think you've got the capital and it's you have a different test of development. That was my point. So
No,
when it gets to the logic stuff, I'm leaning your way.
No, yeah, and I agree with you. And I'd be very, very open to saying, if you're doing 1 or 2 or 3 units, this is going to be tough for you to do. I mean, I actually think there's a business opportunity here that some nonprofits should figure out how to do the back office management of affordability and do it as a fee for service if we want to see this all over the Outer Cape. But that's another thing.
All right.
But I really think, Paul, and I don't know whether you've gotten any indication from Carolyn, but I really think we got to kick the issue of fair housing, because this is like a loophole. If seasonal communities can just literally start amending bylaws and not have to deal with affordability, I think there's a bigger public policy question here. And I don't want to be out front on that one without knowing that we have legal coverage.
Go back though to the first thing you said. And I'm really sorry, Carolyn, because I
Yeah, I
was
know.
really
Yeah, I
relying on
On her, yeah.
her expertise. But so when I looked at this, I was thinking of the project that came in where for 1 unit, it seemed like there was an awful lot of work that needed to be done. And it seemed there had to be a better way to both get workforce housing, because those other units would have been for and affordability. But Muriel, you're saying, so go back now to what the arguments are against sort of doing anything that, because when we started to talk about this, it was to make things easier for people who wanted to do affordable units without going through all the state hoopla to do that.
And I'm in agreement with that. I think there's a legal question. The vehicle that's being proposed here, is this going to stand muster with the Attorney General and fair housing? I think we just that's a baseline question. If it does pass muster, I will be surprised. Then the issue is our current bylaw triggers it after 4 units. So I think it's perfectly reasonable to say, should that unit, should we be closer to Chatham or should we be someplace else? That's absolutely what I think. There's a third thing that Paul has put on the plate where our current bylaw says, okay, whatever you are, like, let's say you're doing a 20-unit building that would generate 4 units. Again, we did this consciously to say we absolutely need affordable, but we also need workforce. We want to give developers some flexibility. So it was every other one. So if you had 4 that you were required to build, 2 had to be affordable, 2 had to be workforce. So that was the compromise we came to, whatever. So I'm open for streamlining and looking at these small things. I think there's a legal question we have to get comfortable with, and then there's a policy question, because if we say that these are only workforce, or we allow boards to say, well, we can waive it and just make it workforce, I don't know where we will have an affordable unit built in this town.
Well, that gets to something else that's been on my head, which is that, so the affordable is 80% of median.
Yeah.
Our median income in Barnstable County is so high that 80% is higher than what most people are making. I don't know who's driving the numbers, but like we're looking at people who are making maybe $20 an hour.
It's like 74,000 or something.
Yeah. It just seems that the affordable in Barnstable County is higher than what the need is, the distress that we see, because people can't afford that, the 80%. Can't afford the rents for 80%. Never mind 120. That's another one that's pretty high, except for maybe some municipal workers who work overtime and.
So the 80%, this all comes from HUD.
Right.
That's all said. So, and that's where it filters down to, from the federal, from HUD down to the state and the SHI requirements. So that's why we don't have any control over that. So if our affordable units are gonna be on the SHI, it's 80% or below.
Right.
AMI, but that's where that all comes from. So if we break out a smaller project to say those don't have to be on the SHI, we have more flexibility to say, what do we want to set the affordability level at? And so we have more control. We can craft it the way we think is appropriate, but we don't get the credit in the state size.
Right.
But we're still creating a unit that is gonna have some sort of protection on it, long-term protection as affordable.
But Mary, what is it that you think may not pass legal muster?
Well, this inclusionary zoning was designed to have put teeth in zoning regulations. The entire law was designed to have put teeth to get affordability. That's the intent and purpose. We are taking that law, and because we are a seasonal community and this other law has given us a little more flexibility, we're trying to morph the inclusionary zoning to say, I mean, this is going to be basically, if you get workforce, which developer is going to ever come forward and say, no, I'm going to take the lower income people? You're going to exclude people in 80% and below.
Is your proposal not to have inclusionary? I'm missing that.
Yeah.
I know, I'm agreeing with what you're saying.
No, I'm saying the tweaks that Paul has put on the table potentially will cross a line legally.
Because instead, let's say there's 100 units getting developed, that would be 20 affordable. But we wouldn't make them 20 affordable, we'd make 10 affordable and 10 seasonal. Well, not seasonal.
That's what we have in the place now.
Yeah.
But a proposal that says, let's take away the cap and let's take away whether they're affordable or workforce is going to the intent of the inclusionary zoning was to create
Take away which cap?
the 80%. Let's not make 80%. We could make it, the argument is we can do anything we want because we've taken ourselves out of the inclusionary requirements. And my question is, we're using the inclusionary statute that was designed to build affordable housing, and we're doing a workaround. I have a serious question as to whether that's going to pass legal muster. So I think we need to answer that
But the
question.
other aspect is that the state also just determined that seasonal communities have a special problems that they're dealing with that have a lot to do with workforce and seasonal workforce. So
They gave them more flexibility. They didn't
So I think
negate.
this might be getting a little confused. The inclusionary zoning bylaw is a state tool that any town can implement. The town can implement it with any threshold that they want. Chatham,
20%.
have 10%. I mean, 10 units. We set it at 5. Because we set it at 5, we're coming up to these issues with these small scale projects.
Right.
So, I mean, the options, I think there's a first point before we get into the workforce, how this. Do we keep it at 5 or move it to something else? If we keep it at 5, which is what it is now, then how do we want to treat the small projects that are only going to yield 1, 2? Do we want those to be?
But by definition, your second statement is disagreeing with the first statement. You know, in one sense, you should just move it to 10. You could just move it to 10. So saying your 10th unit has to be affordable, but then you have a separate tier saying that, but if you build 5, you have to have at least 1 workforce. Okay.
Well, this is the part this is the discussion point. If we keep it as 5, you're only gonna require one unit. And right now, that has to be an affordable unit and it has to be on the SHI.
Right.
So an option would be, we want it to be affordable, but we don't want it to necessarily have to be on the SHI. So we have some less onerous process where it's a deed restriction. You don't go through all the process, but it's gonna be a long-term deed restriction at 80, at whatever percent, 80% or some other, whatever we want, we can set that. And that addresses the small project. Anything where you're creating more than 2 units, you're back to the existing bylaw. It has to be, at least half of them have to be affordable and they have to be on the SHI and you go through the whole thing.
Yeah. Seems reasonable to me, but
So we're really only talking about right now, adjusting the 5 to 9 total range or 5 to 8 total range as the first.
Well, I mean, I have
We're
the,
not talking about saying, and then 9 and above can be all workforce.
no, Martin brought up a point which I hadn't thought. We constructed this so that when you hit 5, you had an affordable. You hit 10, you had an affordable workforce. So what I heard Martin say is we could potentially flip that to say, if you hit 5, one has to be a workforce. And we could maybe make the workforce,
Well, just to clarify, when you hit 2 or more inclusionary units, it doesn't have to be worked. We give that as an option. If someone for some reason wanted both of them to be affordable, they can do, they can be both affordable, but one.
one could be an option, but I'm saying the mandate is a certain percentage that are low income. So if you, I mean, we could reconfigure it to say, you know, we could move the whole threshold to 10 and say we'll be like Chatham but
I like having the lower limit.
or at 5, that 5th one is a workforce, and we can talk about, maybe we can examine whether 120 is the right level for workforce. But the next one
Is affordable.
is affordable. Workforce,
after-
affordable.
Well, after that, I think Paul was saying we could leave it up to the developer after that, if they want to continue doing more workforce. Well, I guess that's.
Well, they
discussion.
could do either or. I mean, there's no prohibition if someone says, I want to do 20 minutes of affordable,
Yeah.
and that's only going to be a nonprofit or
So,
something else.
so right now, just to clarify, when you get to that next increment, which I guess is at 9 or 10.
Yeah.
Right now, so
They can both be workforce according to the current chart.
No, one
No,
and one.
They are requiring, okay.
It was a staggered. We had
I
We had
just
all
looked, it says
80% and then we wanted it to sort of capture. Now, I mean, I think the seasonal communities has raised the income level for workforce to, what has it been raised to, Paul? Is it 200%?
200, yeah.
So 200%,
That's 96,000, that's
Yeah,
170,000.
Yeah.
That's really high. But
Yeah.
still.
no, I mean, yeah,
that's for a family.
Yeah, that's a family of 4.
Okay, so,
and it might be that, you know, and there's no, that's the maximum you can go. We've seen other bylaws that go to 150%. They move the 120 to 150. So there's, you know, again, as Paul said, we have the flexibility of drawing the line.
So is there a consensus that we want to keep the trigger point at 5 units?
for affordability or
No, just for inclusionary to kick in at 5 units in some form that we're gonna require. If the answer to that is yes, then
I would, you know, not having all the history with housing, but understanding what, you know, a smaller developer would be doing. I think we want to encourage someone not to stop at 4 units. If they can build 6 1-bedrooms, I thought what Matt said, I was gonna build a bunch of 2 bedrooms. And I decided to just build all 1-bedrooms because that's where the demand is, you know, whether it's young couples or individuals that want to come down to work. And I think to encourage them to build that 1 or 2 extra units by allowing them to opt out of all the overhead that's involved with the SHI, I think that we say after 5, you have to have, it can be either your choice. But after 10, you no longer have the choice. It has to be affordable.
Well, so at the 5th unit could be workforce or affordable developer choice type of thing. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
And then
like
at 10 units, then the structure of, if you've chosen a workforce, your 10th unit will be affordable, and then we'll go back to the, every other unit?
I was gonna make it simpler than that. I was just going to say, if you're under 10, so your first unit under 10, you choose whether you want to be, because if somebody wants to make it affordable because they have the overhead, maybe they do this as a living, then by all means, let them make it affordable. But if they want to bypass the SHI, let them make it workforce. But once you hit 10, now you have to have at least one unit that's inclusionary, and whatever the mix is after that, we can open for discussion.
Well, can I ask a clarifier here? Because this has come up in some of the work and I get lost in it. I think we may be incorrectly conflating capital A affordable with must be listed on the SHI. And part of what came up with the consultants is you can have something that is deed restricted affordable,
Right.
80% and under. That does not mean it automatically gets listed on the
Right.
SHI. You have to fair market. So you can still have a locally deed restricted
Right.
80% that then doesn't require
To boil
the
it down, I
state
agree with you.
work.
So the idea is that we don't trigger the SHI until after 10 units.
Right.
That's the point I was trying to make.
Right, so the idea is removing the barriers of the additional state level paperwork
Right.
and regulations from those very small developments.
Because you could see.
But then it gives the town the ability to craft a deed restriction that suits.
Yes, yeah.
Suits the
that's good.
needs, and that can be 80% AMI, that can be 136 AMI, you can make that decision.
Right.
So we don't get the benefit as a town of adding that to the SHI. But that doesn't mean we have to lose that it's an affordable unit.
Right.
We're still creating an affordable, a deed restricted capital A affordable unit. It's just not going on the states.
I'm trying to think of some buildings, like if you think of like Max, not Max Seafood, but the deli there. A lot of those buildings, if they get redeveloped, first floor, retail and so forth, they're not quite big enough. They're not going to have 10 units above them, but they'll have 3, 4, or 5 units above. So like this thing that Matt felt is going to be felt by a lot of the developments here in the East End, that they're going to be like, oh, that 5th unit is really going to cost me, never mind, I'm just going to do 4. That's what I'm trying to do. And I'd rather have that 5th
Well,
unit
yeah.
get built than not.
And I think we're all in agreement that under 10, I don't want to speak for Pat, because I know, because we discussed this, I think under 10, I don't think we have a problem of not being on the SHI. I mean, I don't think we are having that problem I don't want to speak to you, Kevin.
No, I mean, I get a little stuck there, yeah.
So I don't think we have that issue. I don't want to create a loophole. I question whether we can do this. Some lawyer will tell us whether we can or cannot. But I question whether,
And you're talking about the more than 10, so somebody was going to build 40 units with.
no, I don't think the legislature ever intended to create a loophole when they did seasonal community. They wanted to promote greater ranges, but this is a loophole that is someone, I mean, we're sitting here being very reasonable, but someone who didn't want any affordability could use this as a way to craft
Right, they could build 9 units
Yeah,
at a time,
and
9 units with one.
I don't know.
We actually have that allowed in the bylaw.
I don't-
Cannot phase your project.
Yeah, you can't phase it. Yeah,
Yeah.
but I just, so nobody here can question the legal issues, and I think there are.
So after 9 units, so 10 and above, is the assumption that that's gonna be a developer who has the pockets and the time and can hire the expertise to do all the work that to be included on the SHI will require.
Right now, yeah. If you're
Yeah.
building, if your project is 10 or more total units, then you're going to be required to create at least two inclusionary starting. And those units have to be, at least one of those, 50% of those units have to be affordable and on the SHI.
Right. So,
If you choose to do the other 50% as workforce, there's still paperwork that goes along with that for restricting it to workforce and all that stuff. It's just, it doesn't go on the SHI and it's not controlled by the state, so we figure that out with the developer, and it's not,
So,
that's. So I don't think, we were not talking about changing anything 10 and above. We're just, what do we want to do with the 10? Between the projects that are created between 5 and 10 units, and they're only yielding one.
And presumably, the developers there are not are not professional developers. They're people who are into retail or commercial, and they want to put some units up above. So we're trying to encourage them to do that. Without having them go through all the SHI requirements.
Right, and it just, the SHI is, it is a lot of paperwork and kind of, but it also puts you into having to run a lottery for the tenant fit up, which you have to hire an agency to do that. Whether you're doing it for a large scale unit or a small scale, it's the same. And the prices I've seen are, $15,000, $20,000, $25,000 to run the lottery. Then you're locked into a lot. That's a lot of the stuff that the expense that comes into it, and then hiring someone to run the lottery and all that kind of stuff. The other part of this too, on the other side, that's on the developer side.
It's like your first 18 months of rent.
And then every SHI unit, the town is then responsible for the monitoring. So there's a town staff component side to this, which I think we just need to that's not a reason to not do this, but I'm just saying we need these units, but the more SHI units we bring on, there's a staff component monitoring, long-term monitoring.
How much ability do we have once it goes on the SHI? How much local preference can we give to people that live on the Island Cape?
The local preference is, we have the language.
Isn't it 70%?
Yeah,
it's, the state projects generally allow local preference of 70%.
And in here it describes what that means. Like, what do we mean by local preference?
right. So it's 70%, and the mechanics of that's why you have the lottery, and then it's open, and then people who want to put themselves in the lottery to get into that, that's where the local preference takes place. So we put in a maximum of 70%. It also depends on who applies. So
It's
sometimes you get,
section- Excuse me, Paul, it's section 779.
Thank you.
I just want to say something. Sometimes local preference gets a little misunderstood because it depends on, did folks from Eastham even apply? And then of the ones that did, do they qualify? So sometimes you see projects where it's like, well, we didn't get, it's supposed to be for Eastham. It's like, well, everyone had an opportunity to throw their hat in the ring in the lottery, but some people do not qualify.
Because there's also just one window, all of a sudden 10 units became available. You know, we're over a 10-year period, everybody's not looking for housing in that one
Exactly.
window.
And it's, yeah,
It's like, all right,
and the local preference is on the initial rent test. It's not, so yeah.
And I'll let Carolyn speak about the experience in Nassau Green, but my understanding of Nassau Green is it had very low, my feeling is that there was publicly stigma attached to that property because we had more people that I heard from, like Orleans and Brewster, applying to get in there than Eastham. And I just think it was a local attitude towards that particular property that we didn't achieve. I mean, my understanding, again, Carolyn was here, is that after it got built, a lot of people in Eastham started putting applications in. And I've been told by Carolyn that the waiting list is heavily, heavily weighted in the Eastham side of the equation. Once you do the initial lottery, then you get on the waiting list. So the long term is people on the waiting list then get picked. So it becomes more open, but I think with Nassau Green, it was not I don't know, for whatever reason, people didn't sign up.
So the 779 local precedence paragraph does require lottery for workforce units as well as affordable, right? So
But that would
I'm
only,
reading it right.
that would only apply to the units that are gonna be
On this-
required on the SHI.
It doesn't quite read that way, am I?
That's why we make
reading of it?
that,
We gotta fix that, okay. Cause it says affordable and or workforce units, 70%, max. And it shall be done by lottery. So if you have more than 2 affordable slash workforce units, you gotta do lottery. Right. So either way, SHI or not, you have a lottery, according to this, the way I do this.
you may have discovered another fix we have to make. But I think the intent is, I mean, workforce is not under any there's requirement for SHI. So maybe, yeah, maybe that needs to get fixed, but maybe
Yeah.
it's getting lumped in there, but so this goes back to the earlier discussion about.
Yeah, we can set the
If-
workforce
If
ourselves.
we just said anything under 10 is just gonna be workforce, like a way to get out from the SHI is just make them workforce. You have to, and then it's just so that's a policy point. What do we want to do with units 10 between 5 and 10? They're gonna trigger 1 or 2 inclusionary units. Do we want those to do? First one is, do we want those to count on the SHI?
I would say leave it up to the developers. Make it optional, whether they want it to be on the SHI, whether they want it to be affordable, or whether they want it to be workforce.
I mean,
I don't see why we have to tell someone you don't have to do something if they're willing to do it.
yeah, it's fair. I mean, yeah, if for some reason they want to do the SHI, that's fine. So we don't require it. It's their choice. If it works out for them for some reason they want to do the SHI, that's fine.
Yeah.
So that's if we all agree on that point, then the next one is, do we want to still keep the split?
Yeah.
One of them has to be,
No, between 5 and 10, and
all
now
we're talking about is projects between
5 and 10.
projects of 5 and 10. So
There is no split, there's only one unit.
There's only one unit,
To
9.
I'm not sure, yeah, I'm not sharing that. 6 months for you, 6 months for me.
well, if you're doing,
It would depend if we wanna make it 8, 9, or 10, right? If we're gonna keep it as based on the current chart, 1 unit, then it would only be totals of 5, 6, 7, 8. And then the full,
yeah, well, so this. And we keep talking about the total units, but to me, it's really the inclusionary units. The number that's triggering the inclusionary units. So
I feel it's the total units. I think
Well-
it's the development size. And
Okay,
what
so
percentage of
if
the
we say-
development size.
you're creating 2 units. If you're creating 1 unit, you don't have to do the SHI, but if you're creating 2, you do, or you're creating 3.
Well, I mean,
It's the SHI
Martin
units.
was saying 10 or more, they should be,
And so here's something that, the way I'm thinking about it is. There's a pressure point for the developer, for the local person to do all this SHI. If they're creating, for the amount of units they're doing it for, that the amount of units is the SHI units, the inclusionary units. So. Do we want, what's the right number? To make someone go through all the SHI if you're for 1 unit, 2 units, 3 units, 4 units, 5 units? It's the SHI, it's the inclusionary units, not the total units.
but under that scenario, you'll never get a developer who will build affordable. And the whole intention,
I understand that, but what I'm trying to get from this group is, what is the number of inclusionary units that we want to have a developer, that we want to have on the SHI? If someone's coming in and say, I'm putting a second floor in my business, I'm not a developer, I run a restaurant, and I'm going to put 4 units on top.
You're
We
all,
want all those to be on the SHI. If the answer is yes, then they're going to be doing a lottery and doing all the other stuff for, and incurring all that time, money and expense to do that.
Just for one unit.
No, for 4 unit, that's what I'm trying to say is what's
Yeah,
the
yeah.
number that we're comfortable with? 4 units, 2 units, 1 unit. I think everyone kind of, I'm hearing consensus that I'm getting one inclusionary unit, the Matt Cole example. I'm gonna do all this work for one inclusionary unit. But
Right.
is it
You,
okay?
you just said that someone developing above the restaurant 4 units, but they're exempt anyways. Because they're less.
Oh, sorry, five.
Oh, okay, okay.
So what is the threshold at which we want to exclude the SHI requirement? Not saying we're not gonna require an affordable restriction, but if someone's doing 1 unit, like right now, the Matt Cole example, he's doing 1 unit, he's gotta do the SHI, he's gotta do all that stuff. If he's doing 2 units, now we want him to do, it's the same project, he's doing 2 units. Now, or what's that number? It's the inclusionary number
Yeah,
that's gonna dictate what this carve out is, not the total units.
Well, the total units though, because you're gonna end up, we started this process by saying we gotta, the market rate units are so exploding. We're gonna just to encourage development.
I understand, but what I'm trying to say is the thing that
No,
the thing that folks are balking at is I have to spend $25,000 and pay an agency to do all this stuff for 1 unit.
okay,
But I have to spend that same amount of money if I'm doing 2 units, 3 units, 4, it doesn't matter. So I'm asking for feedback on,
yeah.
it's the inclusionary unit. That's the driver. At what point are we saying you're creating enough inclusionary units that you should have the
Yeah.
wherewithal and be prepared to
And-
incur that expense? We want those on the SHI.
And I could say, my opinion, that it's either, we're talking about either 2 or 3, but 1, I'm saying I would waive the 1. At 2 or 3, we can debate, I'm happy, you can convince me to move it up. But before we get there, if we go back to the table on 774, I don't understand the math of 9 units. Because if the idea is that every 5th unit has to be inclusionary, whether it's affordable or, what are we doing with the 9th unit? Why are we making the 9th unit?
I suppose of the 10th.
I don't like this non-linear approach to zoning. There's other places, we'll get to it later. But that to me just blows my mind as to why the 9th unit has to be inclusionary. To me, it should be every 5th unit, whatever you're doing, every 5th unit, every 5th unit, every 5th unit. That is straight math. Not, the 9th unit and then the 22nd unit, whatever the number works in again. Oh, it is the 22nd unit.
Yeah.
Make that up. But, I don't know if that was just someone trying to, nudge the numbers lower, but to me that adds cloudiness to the whole system, because that's why we're, so for me, I would say fix this table. And then the first unit is optional. You do what you want with it. It has to be inclusionary, whether it's workforce housing or affordable housing, or whether you put it in on the SHI, or whether we take Jackie's deed restriction that the town crafts. Whatever the developer chooses, because that's going to catch the Matt Coles of the world.
Mhm.
And then once you've developed 10 units, which is sort of where I'm kicking in, or 15 units, we all agree that by the time if it's 20 or 30 units, but at some number, which is what Paul was saying, how many inclusionaries?
Mm.
And then the third question is, once we start agreeing that we're going to have those inclusionaries and they'll be in the SHI, how many can we work off the workforce versus affordable? And you're saying that's where you see the loophole, is that we can reclassify.
no.
I just think the whole thing's.
I think the whole thing, to go back to Tom's question, the crux of the fair housing law is based on the lottery. And we are doing a workaround to lottery.
Only
And
But doing one,
on the
if you're
first
only
unit.
1 unit and you're forced into a
No,
lottery for
I
1
know,
unit, that
I know.
seems excessive to me.
no, I agree. And sometimes we put things forward. We say, can we push the envelope a little, like in tenure or things like that? And I'm very comfortable with 1 unit. I think if we start getting more, we are not only raising what I call fair housing issues in the whole legality of what we're doing, because it feels like a huge loophole. So
And you're saying currently, what we have in code is
not what we have in the code right now, but what we're discussing right now.
I mean, again, I think this could run into some issues. And then there's the policy issue of, we went down the road with this thing because we desperately needed capital A affordable housing and acknowledged that the attainable housing was also a factor. We added that in afterwards. The whole intent of this was to give the town, because of our 3% affordability line, was to give, that was the purpose here. So I'm just really concerned that, I don't want to water it down so much that we're not going to achieve the affordability goals.
Should we consider changing the 50% number? Right now, for instance, if somebody builds a 20-unit development, 4 are required to be workforce / affordable, but only half of those have to be on the affordable side. Right, so a 20-unit, you're only going to get 2 affordables because we had 50%.
Again, so what you're highlighting was the compromise of 3 years ago, where we said, how do we balance the competing interests?
But I'm thinking
And
if you get into the higher number of units, the larger developments, perhaps that 50% level should be changed so that you're requiring, a larger percent of the number that we're requiring here. So of the 4 being required on the current table anyway, for a 20 development, should more than 2 of those be affordable?
3 affordable, 1 work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You could set it to like a
I mean, I think that's
75% level instead of 50.
Yeah, I think that's,
So you don't have the out to say, well, I'm just going to make them all workforce.
Yeah.
Or half the workforce.
that's I mean, again, that's a reason. I think, can I get just a sense of the table here? Because I think that as we're talking about 10 or less units, I think the issue of, we're not concerned about them being on the SHI. We are not demanding that it be either affordable or workforce. If we can get it, no, we have to define what our workforce level is. We might have to revisit that, but we're okay. And to go to Martin's issue, 9 is inelegant.
9 is sort of like 10.
9 is sort of like 10. We
That's not
probably
great.
should make it 10.
That's not how engineers.
Yeah. No, I mean,
Fuzzy man.
I think at the lower levels of this, we're in the right. I think we're all sort of in a similar place. And then I think some of the policy questions about when you get to 10 or more, and where we put that threshold in, I wish Carolyn was here to sort of speak
So
to that.
less than 10 total units is,
One way to say it is just that the first inclusionary unit is optional to the developer, whether they make it workforce housing, add it to the SHI, or not. That's the first unit. And the second unit of affordability or inclusionary then has to follow all the rules. And the question is then, what about the third? Like, then do we do every other, or do we
I
do
mean,
2 to 1?
we're gonna have to play around with the language, obviously, with the consultants. It's, to me, seems like it needs to be, rather than talk about the first unit, it's projects requiring only 1 unit.
Yeah.
Only so that we're not then saying, well, which one did you build first and which one is your,
Oh, I think you're saying, so if someone's building 40 units and they have to build 16.
Your step 1 inclusionary. Step 1 inclusionary requires a local deed restriction in the following form.
Right. If you're
Step 2 inclusionary for projects of 10 or greater total units, then kick in the full location. Say,
The full Monty.
that's what I was trying to say, projects that require 1 inclusionary.
have
It
to
could be, it could be their choice.
Yeah.
They could
It's
do
optional.
they could do affordable
Well,
SHI, they could do affordable local non-SHI, or they could do a workforce. Projects that trigger more than one inclusionary. You have to do the SHI.
For the affordables. And then to Mary's point, are we gonna make them all affordable, or we're gonna stick with the workforce housing?
Right, well, yeah, that's
Aspect
another,
it.
that's another.
Because the workforce housing stays out of the SSI as well, it's SHI. Right,
Correct.
But was there a rationale originally for going with threshold of 9 and 17?
It was, as that, I mean, because we were so far behind, when we looked at a whole bunch of these. And we did actually take some of the strongest language.
Mm.
And that strongest language was, the thresholds or whatever were aggressive because of how far behind we were. That was the theory.
And we're still.
And we're still
behind.
very
So
far
so I
behind.
worry about, although we can do the higher level math, 7 to 8 to 9. I understand, Martin, what you're thinking here, but we take a step back if we adjust that.
Yeah.
Is that going to look, that's not going to give a good message if we put up a new warrant article that drops, a requirement.
But I think.
I can't speak for-
You're cracking this open, you're cracking it open.
Well, I'm just throwing it out for consideration.
I used to work in Somerville, and they had sort of what you would say 5%, 10%, 15, whatever. It was linear math. And you had developers that would stop at 9 units, or would stop at 19 units, or whatever it was, to save themselves one more or two more, whatever the case may be, affordable units. And so Somerville came through and went the opposite direction and got into the nonlinear thing, and then really cramped down on it very hard. I think it was instead of 2 out of 9, I want to say it was 2 out of 6. It really was harsh. And there was all sorts of screaming and hollering, but development continues in Somerville, and that they developers that were figured out, okay, fine, biggest, too bad deal. And I'm only guessing that's similar how this chart eventually developed, is the idea that you don't want to stop people at 9, you need 10 units, you need 50 units, whatever it might be. But if it's linear, then build this invisible wall. Oftentimes with developers, they don't want to spend, the return on that 10th unit isn't worth it, so just stop at 9.
No, we'll stop it.
And that's the logic
Well,
behind
But
it.
if they stop at 8, now you got 2 less housing.
No.
units.
Yeah, but this is a common problem. Boston just, I don't know if you saw it, just Michelle Wu just had to lower the limit because they had the limit at
too high.
17 units, and everyone 16 unit
Right.
buildings were being built all over Boston. So now she went down to 12 or 13. Of course, the real estate community went crazy and they're still building property.
They-
So I mean, it's just something that it's not part of what they want to do. But I mean, to get, you won't get the affordable. I mean, the whole purpose here is we have such a deficit in affordability that's the reason. And as we think about going up and down Route 6 and all the single family homes that are decrepit, and we're going to go back in the spring to look at land use and do we do multifamily and do we do all of this stuff? You're going to have a lot of projects in those units that could come in, I mean, there's going to be a lot of development right now that'll slide under these, and we won't get any affordability. So I think, when you think about all up and down Route 6, it's not like there's a lot of tea time sitting around. There's one tea time, and there's a few properties that have depth that could probably do 10 or 20 units, but there's going to be a lot of places where people are going to come in with 4 or 5, which was why I like Martin's thing of at least, at the end of the day, at least one of them
Yeah,
is going to be affordable.
Well, what about if on the smaller
inclusion.
buildings, smaller developments, they had to be affordable? So instead of, if you're
One or
doing
two
one
be
year,
affordable. It's the third one, maybe, to
Right.
get into the workforce option.
yeah, so don't do workforce right away, do affordable right away.
That'll pick up any of the smaller little projects
Yeah.
like that. You'll always be going into affordables.
Yeah,
I mean, the workforce is needed as well, so you're gonna get some pushback maybe, but at the same time, I think we have a greater issue with affordability. Anyway,
On which size projects?
on the smaller projects,
Which is,
It's-
how are you
and-
defining that?
I'm maybe under 4 units
For affordable or 4 units total?
or total. All that the one that has to be something has to be affordable.
But the trick there, of course, is amortizing the 25K or so for the lottery
No,
on
no,
just one
it wouldn't
affordable.
have to, it would.
Oh, not a SHI.
Not part of SHI.
But you're saying very similar to what we're saying, Pat, except you lowered the number to 4.
Well, except I'm saying, instead of having, workforce, make in those small projects, it affordable instead of workforce houses.
So right
10 and
now-
under, the ones you have a one. You're saying
Right.
as opposed to, the
Yeah.
developer head can do whatever he wants.
Make it
Propose
affordable.
So, you know what,
It's just, I'm still not quite clear. So I'm trying to determine a project that is yielding a certain amount of inclusionary units. At what, how, trying to say this. What's the number? Again, I go back, the inclusionary units. What number do we want set that those have to be on the SHI?
What I'm thinking, and maybe what I'm hearing as well, is if you go back to this chart, that let's say up to 10 units. So that would be a maximum of 2 inclusionary. Both of those would have to be affordable. Neither has to be SHI. When you get either 10 or above, say above, then you're getting in, you want it to be SHI, even though it's still only 2 units for the next couple of levels, but you're also got a bigger project and the developer is more willing to,
That's making,
has more money.
oh, that's making it very, sorry, that's making it very confusing, because now it's you're saying if you build 9, 10, 11, 12, and then at 13, now all of a sudden they have to go to SHI.
And where I'm making the split on that, Martin, is that by the time the issue is the developer's going to say, well, gee, it's if I build 9, it's 2. If I build 10, it's 2. Why is it 10?
Because
I have to spend the money.
that's why I want to change the plan and just.
Well, again, I'm open to that. I'm just saying that I think the logic is that by the time you get to 10 units or more, the developer has more market units in there. There's more profit in there for them. The impact of a lottery and all the headaches that go with it is greatly reduced versus a project where he's only built in 4 units. Okay, if we want to go up to eliminate the 972 thing, and start it at 10, I'm open to that. But I think here at the 9 unit level, we can pick up an extra unit. We're not putting them through the SHI thing, so
Okay, so
they still have some incentive with that. Personally, I would go with both of them being affordable and not being on SHI. But when you get to the 10 unit level, that's, you got to make a brick somewhere. And at 10 units, they're making enough money on the market rate things that you can afford a lottery a lot better than someone.
projects with total units between 5 and 10 is an option for the developer. They can do affordable, non-SHI, affordable SHI if they want.
That's what I was saying. Gives you,
well, Pat had a different,
And I'm saying, on those small
you're
projects.
saying make it affordable only.
Make it
I'm
affordable.
going to advocate for a few moments.
Non-SHI affordable.
Well, currently provision 3 on the next page does with the no less than 50%, the units shall be affordable. So right now the structure already says if you only have one,
Yeah.
it's affordable.
Right.
can I,
So,
Structure
we can-
isn't.
Sorry, go ahead, Mary.
well, I'll let you
I
finish.
want to advocate for workforce housing because nobody's been advocating for it.
Yes.
And I try to do that even though, I think there's a strong need for, we all talk about affordable, low income housing. 80% of the AMI is definitely a demand there, but we have this demand where there's people making $90,000 a year, to a couple, that's each of them making, $25 an hour, roughly. And
So that's why we had the compromise before, the back and forth.
yeah, so they're not going to qualify for the AMI, but we want them to qualify.
So can I do something? And I'm not, this has been, Paul, maybe you're gonna say I need more direction. I really don't think we can give you direction without Carolyn sitting here. She's the head of the Affordable Housing Trust. We're talking about a major policy objective, and I feel bad about that. And I can brief Carolyn and I can have her circulate her opinions if she's up, she's got bronchitis, if she's up for it. But we need to have that voice here because the person who spends all her time looking at this is the one who's not at the table today. And I just really feel like that's important.
But is there a consensus that projects between 5 and 10
Yes,
do not need to have SHI.
yes, yes,
Okay, just that alone
There's a big,
will allow us
yes,
to get
yes.
a good deal down the road.
That's,
The
that's,
draft.
yeah, we're,
Okay.
and I think Carolyn it would go along with that. And then I think the nuances of where the line is and what the trigger points are, I think,
Yeah.
you know, I think we should,
I think that's a good
We
argument.
need-
I would like to hear more of Carolyn's input.
Yeah.
So when we get above a 10 unit development, are we gonna stay at 50-50? Or do we go
Yeah.
70-30? And we do something else? I'm happy to hear arguments about that. I'm not setting this.
I was reading this yesterday and the day before, in the back of my head. It'll be good to hear what Carolyn wants, is thinking, you know, so, yeah.
I'll just say that the only two projects that have come down in this bylaw are two local businesses. They're doing it so they can create housing for their staff.
Yeah.
So that doesn't mean every project.
Yeah, we had one a
That's just
couple of years ago, the guy was, forget the address, was down.
The ADUs, yes,
Yeah.
that was too, yeah, that didn't trigger inclusionary, but yeah,
The whole logic was to keep his workers.
he built 4 ADUs. And they're for
Yeah.
his staff.
Because otherwise the impression is gonna be, okay, I'm gonna build 5 units, 4 of them are gonna be my workers, and the 5th unit, I'm basically handing off to some list to somebody in some other town who's gonna determine who my workers are gonna
it
be.
may also be one of your lower paid workers.
Well, that's what Paul was saying. That's what
Yeah.
gets into the workforce housing
Yeah.
that we
Yeah.
set different
So,
requirements.
All right, we only have 45 minutes left and I just wanna, so we,
Good.
I don't know, so we sort of came up to give you one piece of direction and we'll continue this.
The other question I had is there any pushback on my recasting that they would become linear? That we just do a straight 20%?
Only that it looks like it's going backwards.
Oh, I just,
So it really depends, I think, on the mix. of
you know what?
How it all.
I would I would maybe go up to 10%,
Yeah,
thinking as you're
You
thinking,
know-
but above 10%.
I know-
Units above that, the non-linear, I think is. That,
I guess that doesn't-
it's been around a long time at this point
You-
as to why it's the fuzzy math, because you don't want to limit, have the developer make that decision too soon about, well, I'm gonna stop here because I don't want to. I can't tell you what the best combination is in the non-linear, but the fact that it is non-linear, it is from many years of experience.
your friend Jim did the table for us.
No friend of mine.
No friend of yours. And it has to do with the percentages. If somebody can do the math and run the 9,
Yeah,
if you just had one,
So
it's 11%. And I think there was a feeling that was too low and it was adjusted because of the percentage stuff. This is my memory, which is not the best in the world.
I think if we have a rationale, we say, hey, it looks like we're limiting developers from going to the ninth unit.
Yeah.
Right, then we have a rationale for doing it, just to say we don't like the math,
Yeah.
I have trouble with that.
All right, we gotta move on, because we're gonna spend next meeting, and we need to talk about meetings, quite frankly, when I look at the workload here. But, okay, can we do the whole, get this one off the board so we can, code enforcement officer. We've got a draft of something, it would be really good to maybe put that one to bed.
So I sent that, there's a really useful archive of planning info, the land use reporter. And I did find an article from a long time ago, but I feel it's instructive.
It was very instructive.
Yeah. So this draft is kind of based off the example that was in that thing. It actually came from town of Huntington, which maybe you heard about Western Mass somewhere. That's where they actually put this into this is what their bylaw is. They created the zoning enforcement. So when I read that article and I went and saw what they did, I took a lot from the draft. So basically, I'm calling it a zoning enforcement officer, but it's really got a hybrid of the duties. And based on what I was reading, I think we can kind of create our own path on this. So the first part of this is just for consistency, because we already have talks about the Board of Appeals, but as we're delegating authority, I think we just need to address like the planning board's also in here. And so this is just adding language to correspond to what we have for ZBA already. And then the zoning enforcement officer power and duties. Basically, this would allow the town manager through the select board to appoint a zoning enforcement officer or potentially more than one. So there's some flexibility. That officer could be the building official if that's appropriate, but it could also be other staff. So I think that gives some flexibility with staffing capacity. The powers and duties, I went back into, these are the first three are already things that are in the bylaw that we've kind of just referring to as designee. I think this strengthens it and clarifies it. 4 is just adding in kind of this thing that is basically already happening in practice where, Jackie and I are already looking at the zoning and we're the ones that are writing the zoning with all of you and we're closer to it and we're already doing it in practice. We review the stuff. So this would just kind of codify that part of that is making the determinations. As part of the-
Can I back up a little bit? You first talk about zoning enforcement officer. Language is the Board of Appeals is authorized to appoint a zoning enforcement officer. And then jump down to the planning board
I
is
know.
authorized to appoint.
Yeah,
a zoning
that was
my
enforcement officer.
question.
Is it,
We have two
do
zones.
we have separate ones or,
Oh, yeah.
we
no, I
use
see
the
what
same
you're saying.
one
Clean
or?
that up. The intention, it's supposed to be, yeah, I see what you're saying. The intention is that they're appointing.
Who is
Well-
appointing, planning or zoning?
Looks like me, we're both are doing it, so we can have competing officers.
Yeah.
Why do we have both of
Let's
them?
have the other thing.
That's
That's not the intention. I see what you're saying.
What is the intention, Paul?
The intention is that an entity can appoint a zoning enforcement officer. It's not intended
No.
that you would have.
I know, we don't. That was
So it's gonna be the same person. It's just that the language that the state language that allows the zoning to create a zoning admin position, we talked about the last time, actually comes from the zoning board.
But then on the next page, there's a third appointment by the town manager. So which is it?
Yeah,
right?
I understand what you're saying. It's just the intent is to create one.
Authorizing one of the board.
I guess the way I was thinking was the town, through the town manager, can appoint a staff person, one or more, as zoning enforcement officers to do all of this is the authority to do the zoning determinations, to do the enforcement and all that stuff, which is not necessarily a ZBA or planning board duty.
So why not just quote Mass General Law and you're done, right? Just say Mass General Law, whatever this is, 48, Section 7 allows the town to appoint a zoning enforcement officer, period. Done.
Well, I think it's that there's two separate things going on. So some of the duties and powers that are being delegated here specifically by the town manager are ones that are currently seated under the building commissioner, who reports to the town manager and not to the board.
Mm.
Whereas like provision 1 under powers and duties is something that is planning board specific. So it's sort of for those boards to have to give away those duties.
So legalities that legal
But
counsel
but-
can fix for you, right?
but
You don't have to
It's
fix it.
still.
It's not, it's
one
not,
person,
Yeah.
it's
but
not mass general law though. Isn't it local ordinance that the planning of the zoning board? So I mean, if we put this
Mhm.
forward that the town manager is the appointing authority, we don't need two boards to do this.
Well, I'm putting it in here. I totally understand what you're saying. And we need to clean that up, but I was kind of putting it in here to make sure that I'm addressing the appointing authority for someone to be able to approve a special permit or comes from the zoning board. That's in Mass General Law.
Right.
That's why that's in there. And I added planning board. There is no equivalent for planning board because planning board, there's nothing really in Mass General Law about planning boards. Those are, so I'm putting that in there just so that there's consistency that zoning board can delegate to a zoning enforcement officer the ability to make these approvals, which normally would have to be done by the board and the planning board for
So
consistency.
how would you expect this to, would this basically mean the town manager would then nominate somebody and send that to the zoning board and they would vote on it, say, yes, we agree to do it?
Yeah, I mean, if we act this worst case scenario that we have to actually go through this whole cycle just to be in
And would
line
we
with the
do it-
law, yes, that
And
would
would you
be.
do it once a year, once you're done forever? Or every time when personnel changes?
I mean, I think it actually would be probably on a personnel sheet, because, and this is one of the reasons for doing this is staff, I mean, it's staff capacity, it's skill sets.
I don't think that's too onerous, that, you know, if people change and. So how's the difference between the town manager, is the board of selectmen out of this, we leave them out of it then? I think so.
I think,
I think this is an executive staffing decision. And I don't,
Oh, no, but of the delegation of authority would have to get voted on by the board. That's the false point was.
yes. That may not be, I put that in there just to cover the base,
Well, you-
that may not be necessary, it may already be within the scope of the town
All
manager's
right,
duty.
all right. But either way, I'm happy whichever way is legally fair to
Yeah.
have.
Yeah,
yeah, I think Carolyn just needs to clean up what
Yeah.
we just,
yeah, the intent, like I said, I know what you're saying, we gotta clean that up, the intent is not to have two good.
No,
It's
I
all
was just-
gonna be.
Yeah.
no,
But I think we need this in here to start, just so it's easier to peel it back, I want to have like all the
Yeah.
regulatory hoops we gotta jump through, we might be able to simplify and just say, it's all under town manager authority or whatever, like, local. Clean it up, but the concept is to create a zoning enforcement officer that will be empowered to make these types of approvals, which normally would be the board's responsibilities, and then the second part is the enforcement piece.
Well, before you get down there, so question, what is minor site plan? Let's find one clarification.
That's defined and, yeah.
Those are projects under 500 square feet.
So anything over that, this person would not have authority over?
Anything over that requires major site plan approval, you go to the.
Okay, so that as usual.
can I ask you a question? When the last time we discussed this, you had presented the law and there was an enforcement officer and administrator. And I think the consensus of this group was, if we're gonna make these changes, why don't we go for the administrator? Because it's a very broad authority, which could then be in our guidelines tailored down. Like, so that was just a thought we had, and so I'm wondering what's your rationale for not being an administrator versus?
I'm calling it a zoning enforcement officer based on what the other town did and got approved, but this really has.
This has all the powers of, quote, the administrator?
That's what this section is. The administrator. The state statute gives the zoning board the authority to delegate some of its
Yeah.
duties to a zoning
Okay.
administrator,
I
which
see.
is the ability to issue special permits or variances or whatever. Doesn't necessarily talk about the enforcement issue. So that's what this part would codify, that those boards can delegate to a person or persons the ability to make
do
these
this.
regulatory approvals.
But your intent is not to have this person necessarily be doing any of the or to Tom's point, if it triggers more than 500 square feet, it's outside the realm here, it's gonna go to a board. So we don't have to, there's no, rogue administrator who's
Correct.
signing off on things.
Correct.
It's really.
Because these are
Yeah.
things that are already designated to staff. Like, I'm already making minor site plan, I mean, it's probably been 3 maybe. But they'll increase. So as the planning board's designee, I've already been doing minor site plan. This just puts it under the umbrella, and I'm just saying it's me, I'm not looking for fancy titles, but it's just. To be realistic, it just empowers me as the zoning enforcement officer to be making these decisions rather than a
It
designated.
also protects you legally, for the
Yeah.
things you could be rejecting, people say, well, you didn't have the permission, you didn't have the power to do that, actually.
One
Right.
additional suggestion for legal review when they get to it is number 4, is that just within minor site plan projects, or is that zoning determination for all projects? It doesn't seem to be under the minor site plan.
Yeah, it was not intended to be limited to that, so, because this gets into all the rest of just the general zoning determinations for any projects.
Okay, fair.
There is a vetting process that has to happen to say, if your setback's right, are you over the threshold for this, that, or other. So this would, again, it's to be able to designate other staff to increase the capacity rather than just have this all on the building official, which is always just gonna be one person. And this is not the main crux of their job. And building officials have different skill sets. And I'm gonna make this point many times if this goes through to whoever's saying it's not anything to do with our current building. Matt Basil, he's actually been very proactive on the enforcement, so it's nothing at all against him personally. He has actually good skill set, but if he takes another job somewhere else, then we're right back to, we don't know what that skill set, and we're also interim. In the interim, we don't let this, there's technically nobody who's empowered to do anything with zoning. If we don't have a building official for 5 months, because,
And is this Basil's first time as a building commissioner?
yeah, he was a local inspector in Yarmouth for that.
Well, I actually think that the narrative that you sent out from June of '88 is like, we'll cut and paste this in terms of the rationale and
Right,
it was
Yeah.
really,
Very well done.
quite good.
Is site coverage, I know we're not discussing that right at the moment, but is site coverage included in this determination?
So that's part of the making the zoning term. If the project comes in, it would be looking at, is there a site coverage?
It seems like in the matrix you sent out, there were a lot that are above site coverage limits for a particular plot. So I'm assuming that hasn't been done in the past.
Okay.
So, yeah,
But
Well,
that's discussion.
Yeah, it's if those zoning determinations are what send people for their special permit or their variance.
So presumably all the
So that's
special
But
permits,
it's
yeah.
correct. It's you need
Well, like-
extra permission
Like
beyond
Jordan
your building
Circle
permit.
was like a 16% site use. That's
Yeah,
huge.
Well, yep.
so the second part deals with the enforcement piece. And again, it's empowering the zoning enforcement officer, whoever that would be, to take action if a request for zoning enforcement comes in, and then they be empowered to write the letter, do the follow, work with them to get situation rectified. That's one thing that I had in there was I was looking for feedback on if and when fines should be assessed. Is that something that should be at through the staff level, or that's something that should be brought to the appropriate board?
Well, the conservation officer issue fines, right? So why shouldn't the zoning enforcement official issue fines? So long as it's cut dry and not subjective.
I mean, I'm just
My thought.
even.
I mean, I know the Conservation Commission, people come before them and they get quote fined regularly. Is that something that they are voting on, Paul, or is that the enforcement officer?
I don't know. I haven't had a chance to talk with Alex. I think it's both. I think the Conservation Commission, when the project is before them, dealing with it.
Yep.
But I think the agent, if they go out and discover something, someone's just cut down about fees, it's not actually a project in front of the commission, that they can issue citations.
Can they issue a citation and then does it go to the conservation to approve it?
I don't know. That's some I want to see what their model.
Yeah, I would think that we either have, there's three things we could do is either he's gonna write a recommendation for a fine and then it gets approved at the next monthly meeting. He issues the fine, but it can be appealed to the board in town. Or he issues the fine and stuff like you gotta go to court, you gotta go to Orleans to deal with it. I would tend to be option A or B first, so have the board involved either as a round of appeal or approval. And maybe you could say that,
Well,
I would go with B. So.
what was
It
B?
would be.
I know.
Seriously, the officer would administer the fine.
Mhm.
And if it's appealed, it would be appealed to the board.
Are most fines in the zoning areas cut and dry? In other words, are they prescribed?
Yes, and guided by state law.
Yeah, so it's not subjective. So to me, that is easy enough for zoning enforcement.
It's 100. The max is $300 per day.
I think it'd be really good for consistency to understand exactly what conservation does, because it would be good to parallel them. But I just want people to remind people that, you know, we're not trying to cut Cecil out of, you know, the big basil out of the big things. This is the clear cutting. This is the landscaping between properties. This is the height of fences that might not be, I mean, there's all this crap that, you know, it has to be addressed. You know, I'd just be interesting to see if they have any differentiation. Does Alex just issue fines and then that's a report back to the?
Yeah, and I definitely know he definitely reports back to the board. I just don't know if all fines run through the commission.
Yeah.
It's authorized through the commission first.
I agree with Mary.
Yeah.
Let's follow the path.
Let's
that they
figure
did.
whether they.
But I do like the idea that there's at least, that there's an in-house review process, whether it's pre or post, that it hits one of our boards before they have to go to the board. Before they can just pay it. And I corrected you, all right, I screwed up, here's my bill, because it's cheap to pay $100 in the show that needs me.
But I think a lot of this is not so much the fines, but the work of this is getting it fixed, especially with our clear cutting. So it's like, my approach is like, I don't want to find someone. If we find somebody, we get all that money just goes into the general fund. Like, I would rather have them spend their money planting back the trees or fixing whatever was wrong, you know. So that's why a lot of this stuff, takes time. The zoning enforcement, if the way our approach is in Eastham is just, we want compliance at the end of the day. So it's going to be like, okay, we're going to write you a letter, we're going to give you X amount of time. I mean, we can be more strict with it, but it's like X amount of time, give us the plan for what are you planting back, and show me that it's appropriate it's native and it's appropriate. It's not just a row of hedges because you cut down native woods, and that's not what we want. So that's why.
It's
not-
gonna be easier than the native woods. What about the legacy trees? Have people come in and permits for legacy trees?
And we don't even know if they've been torn down.
I mean, no one's come in to ask permission.
I just happen to know it's a bunch got taken down this past 2 weeks, and like, you know.
Yeah, it sure seems like
This is why.
Yeah.
Like,
Oh, yeah, I mean, it's definitely happening. It's just no one's actually gone through the process.
And well, one of the things just to think about in terms of the approach, because I know you haven't been punitive, you've tried to be cooperative. But I think the downside of that is if there's no accountability ever, people sort of view this as lax and they can kind of blow it off. So I'm not saying you want to make an example out of someone, but you know, it wouldn't hurt every once in a while if someone is really blowing the town off to really start finding them, to like wake up, you know, like we're not just gonna write you a letter every week and say, you know.
conservation does find people, and some of them, you know, they got fined last year. And,
They also, it is a series of letting you know that it's what the violation is and what's going on and mitigation, right? If the end goal is
So-
actually to fix it.
yeah, people getting
mitigation.
fined, no one's getting fined by surprise.
There are the opportunities for mitigation, and here's what needs to be done, and come to the commission so we can talk about that. And
Well, and also I mean, again, I don't want to make more work, but I mean, we could put something in here. There could be some procedures approved by the zoning and planning board in terms of, I mean, I don't know if we want to even go there in terms of, is it already laid out? Like the first thing is a letter, the second, or call, a letter, you know, is there some progressive discipline?
There's no policy there's no official, that's been
your approach.
Do we also find the tree cutter? I mean, to me, that'll stop it. If there's only a limited number of tree cutters and they should know their business.
Yeah.
And we should be finding them as well.
I know the conservation model is the owner, the property gets fined because they're responsible.
But they're relying on this person that they said come in, and the person a lot of times says, oh, here's another tree you need to cut down, you should consider that one, and they just start adding, because they've done it to us and we've said no.
I mean, that's a legal question, I guess. Who should
pay?
Who's responsible? So
Maybe if we get Carolyn on the phone next time we can,
Yeah.
we can-
So I have a question on this one. It says that over here, the building official may withhold, but may not. Why is the word may there as opposed to shall?
Might be wordsmithing, but the intent, I put that in there just to make sure that it was understood that the building commission still has total control over issuing the permit, because
I read
even
that,
if the zoning enforcement says there's nothing problem here, but then the building commissioner may say, yeah, but this meets zoning, but it's gonna create an unsafe situation nonetheless, I'm not gonna issue the building.
So it's at their discretion. That was
yeah, I looked at it as strengthening language, by saying, hey, he could do this.
Cause it, that could very well happen that there's technically no zoning issue, right?
Oh, I see.
But
Okay.
in reality, it's like, well, this thing's gonna, and I'm not,
Yeah.
so that way that, it's also just to make sure that trying to be sensitive to the authority of the building commissioner that, they have, that,
Yeah, they're gonna.
they have total
Yeah.
autonomy over whether they're issuing a building permit, so they can overrule the zoning if it's creating a building code issue that has to get resolved, so.
Does the building commissioner have a fast license, that requirement? Like,
Oh, yeah,
like
the
not-
state.
It's not a building license, but a building
Yes, it's a
inspection.
state,
license.
yeah, certification.
That's right, I assume they did, yeah.
Going back to the tree situation, I actually literally, like the month this went through, my giant legacy oak died. And so I immediately called Paul and I said, I spent thousands on this tree. I'm lunatic. I had it metal braced. I had it treated. I did a lot of money on this tree and then I had to take it down, but there was nothing. I mean, so I just basically made Bartlett Tree write me something for the file to say, your tree was diseased and was going to fall down. Because I just didn't want to be out there being the one violating this. So
When we're in the wetland, if that happens in the wetland, we have to go to,
you have to
agree on that,
go
like we'll have, tree guy will write it up, take that to conservation.
conservation.
And they'll say, yeah.
So maybe it's an interesting question to ask Carolyn, if you have to do it in wetlands, is that because of the wetland statute or is there, I mean, you know.
Yeah, wetlands controls everything within.
But if you,
Sure.
but I mean, is the tree thing specific? Could it apply to other legacy trees? Is an interesting question for Carolyn to say,
Well, it's a good point.
so you can put it back on the tree,
Does
the Bartlett
I think
trees.
your question is, does conservation have anything to do with managing, clear cutting the legacy trees when it's outside the wetland?
No.
That's a no. So who is in charge of that? So that's sort of weird. That depends where the tree is, which path it
No,
goes to.
no,
get
my,
permit.
my point is your statement that if you get something that your tree guy
That's
says,
seized, right.
this is in violation, you've got to go to conservation.
My tree guy has been conservation several times.
Yeah,
both
so
my-
so how do we create the same situation that Bartlett shows up at my lawn and says, it's dead, it should come down, but here's the piece of paper you
Yeah,
gotta take to the town to say, this is why I'm taking it down.
Yeah, because in my case, the guy said, "Oh, you're next to the marsh. Let me,
Yeah,
I'll get you into conservation." So he took care of the whole thing. He went to conservation. This is 10 years ago. He went to conservation, got permission to take down the dead trees. But,
So Jackie did create a mailing list for all the local tree companies and the
Landscapers,
Landscapers.
excavators, fence companies,
Yeah.
site work. Anybody who
so
might
we
need it.
are prepping
there's
something.
more and more, I know, I've noticed, I think it's almost 50-50 when I see tree people, whether they have any markings on their equipment or not. It's like we have a lot more fly by night.
Yeah. So we are prepping something that we can target out to those companies now.
Paul, if you're gonna pose any questions to Carolyn before she shows up on the 16th, could you just put on this, like, this notion of the vendors, whether we're talking about cutting trees down or putting, say, depending on where we go with signs, putting vinyl fencing up. Is there any enforcement mechanism similar to what conservation now has? Or is that just because they have all kinds of powers under the wetlands and there's a different
I
thing?
think a good example to use, and I hate to bring up my favorite house on Bridge Road, but that big farmhouse did sell in the past couple of months, that had been on the market for over 2 years. And I just noticed this week that 3 of the biggest trees in town are gone and they got flush to the ground. They were 5 feet across at the, diameter.
There they go.
And they may have been diseased or dangerous or problematic, but we have no record.
Yeah.
And they have no records.
Some- one looks like one-
Closed development, right?
It's just sort of an example of, they could have been overhanging the antique house or whatnot, but that's somebody who possibly bought the house. And within 2 weeks of buying the house, hired a tree company, they came and did whatever they're doing, and they're all gonna be
Yeah.
big ones.
I think that's important. Okay, can we do a check on some things? We have a very big conversation on site coverage that we have to have, and we are not gonna do it in 15 minutes. I mean, there's nothing we did today that wasn't important that we had to do anyways. And I would really love to have Carolyn be part of this, because this is a really big strategic conversation. We are coming back to inclusionary, and we're gonna have Carolyn on this December 16th. So we have a bunch of stuff we can come back to. We can ask legal questions, et cetera. I know this is holidays. Can we put a meeting in between now and the 16th and I don't want to say just do site planning, there'll probably be 16 other things that pop up, but I do think this site planning discussion with all the data we have, we really need to kind of almost spend 2 hours just putting our heads around that.
Yeah, can we just talk on a couple of tangent issues to site coverage before we table it?
No, I was just trying to schedule, but if you,
I'm happy to schedule something.
I just want to schedule, I just want to see is it feasible that we could schedule something?
Oh, yeah.
And Paul, this is
I-
also with you. Could we schedule something before the 16th? I mean, just throwing it out, the 9th, next Tuesday. I mean, because that's the only Tuesday before the 16th.
What day is our strategic planning committee meeting?
That's the 8th.
This is January 8th?
No,
No,
we're talking December.
December.
So
I'm
next
just
week.
saying,
To add in December.
So when's the strategic planning meeting you're talking about?
No, that was just for
that's
Sorry,
for
that's-
them.
tonight.
That's for them.
I just know we have a meeting next week, so when we're talking about squeezing in between now and the 16th, we're talking about.
I can do that.
Who can do the 9th?
I think I'm free. Check.
December?
I'm out of town. New York City,
Are you for the whole week?
from
Looks like my
Thursday of this week to Tuesday.
What about Wednesday? The 10th?
I could also do Wednesday, the 10th, but can people
I have
make
an
it?
all-day interview, board interview for the new executive director for Pickup Compact.
Last week.
But Thursday the 11th, I'm free, but I'm not the important one here. You guys
Well,
are-
I
it's
can't do the 10th.
You can't do the 10th,
The 11th?
the 11th?
10th?
I think I'm okay on that.
Paul?
The 11th is there's an affordable housing trust at 9 to 10:30, but after that,
Well, that would be Carolyn.
yeah, Carol will get that.
Could we do 11 to 1 on the
11th?
11th? And give her,
How about right after, I can move my lunch meeting, but I. 12:30 or 1.
I can do anything on the 11th.
I'm,
Actually, I'm sorry, I'm not gonna be able to. There's the 11th in the afternoon, I'm not gonna be here, so I have to leave off Cape for a wedding.
so 11 to 1 would not work for you.
No,
Okay. And you can't do the 10th, and you can't do the 9th. Can you be on, oh, well, this is an important meeting.
I can call in on the. bus.
Monday, the 8th,
On
Monday, the
Thursday,
8th.
Tuesday, the 9th.
Monday, the 8th. We didn't put that on the table. Monday, the 8th. Oh, you're still in New York
I could call in while
on the 9th.
bus and listen in. I probably can't talk too much. They'll throw me out the bus, but.
That, it would be better to have us here than on the bus.
We're just running out of time.
Bus to New York, are you crazy?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have to,
I got to Providence and then
And are you getting, what time are you getting home?
on Tuesday, we get back to Providence at 5:00.
Okay, so that's not even an issue.
But the entire afternoon, I could.
You could be listening
I
in?
could listen. And I'll count for quorum.
Well, could we try with the ninth? Tom, I hate to do that, but and this will not be the last discussion. We just have to have a really big discussion about so many
Right,
elements
right.
of this
Yeah,
that
and that,
that if we could try to do the ninth to really get it down, and hopefully that'll work for Carolyn, and that's if it doesn't work, well, we still have a quorum, but are we talking 10 to 12 then? 10 to 12, task force, and we will do site coverage.
Which day?
The 9th,
nine,
Next Tuesday.
and Tom will be on the phone.
I'll be on the phone at 1 o'clock. In the morning, I'll be making my way to the bus station, so I can try to dial
Oh,
You said 10?
oh, well, is,
in. You set it for, I mean,
can we do it later? On the 9th?
don't change it, that's for me.
yeah.
Say 1 to 3 or.
I mean, I was gonna say 1 to 3. We could do 1 to 3 to
I
give
can
you
dial in
access.
For that.
Does that work for everyone?
Yeah,
All right, let's make it 1 to 3,
Tuesday, December 9th.
1 to 3. And the agenda is minutes and site coverage. That's all we'll do. Good luck.
I always drive to Stanford. This stuff's, it's at Stanford. There's a train every 10 minutes into.
Okay,
So
Go to Stanford.
we have on
Any
our
part-
calendar a
Oh.
workshop,
To drive. Never
With strategic
I haven't met the way.
plans.
Drive to Stanford.
but not a date.
And then
Can we get a date?
1 hour.
We have one.
Bus rides.
Yes, we need to send out a
At Sabre, you
schedule.
can also park for free, actually,
Oh,
but there's not. that many
what
companies.
what is that workshop that we put on?
So-
That was when we were prepared.
Yeah, that's just a
Yeah,
placeholder
and then even though.
workshop, we always have.
Yeah, but there's more than.
Oh,
one way.
when we get the final reports, and we won't be doing that on, I'm not even gonna be in the country. That would-
Bus.
We can-
Yeah, the best.
it's no,
I'm not back till January 24th.
Play and say,
okay, because there's no date
Central.
here.
Yeah,
That's a,
you don't.
yeah, we'll just
Yeah,
have
go home when
to,
you-
it's kind of,
Whether it's.
it'll be late.
yeah, when we have our recommendations all in draft form,
Oh,
that's
okay,
when we have the workshop.
okay.
And we are
That one, yeah, okay.
so close, but not,
Don't worry about that.
not really close.
All right.
All right,
It's,
Then extra schedule folder.
you're good for 1 to 3 on the 9th. We're really good. Okay.
okay.
Miscellaneous, Tim,
I had some easy,
easy.
low hanging fruit, I think.
Okay,
When we talk about on page 84, section 7.4.3, coverage limits. In one category, we're including the basements in our discussions on maximum site coverage. But then we do include the basement on gross floor area. I don't understand why so on site coverage includes all floors, screen porches, garages, but no basements. That's the definition in the definitions of site coverage. But in the definitions of gross floor area, which is the habitable space, we do include finished basements. So when we're looking
We're
at,
looking at definitions. Right?
yeah,
that's probably a catch, because the intent was to exclude.
Well,
basement.
it's two different things. The gross floor area,
yeah, but and then they're both being used in the same table, so then it gets real confusing. Like if you just grab that, we'll go look them both up, make sure.
I see what you're saying, yeah. I think site coverage. Yeah, that's a cleanup. Gross floor area is in the definition just as a general term. It's not actually tied into our use of it in site coverage. But I see that
The language.
that's confusing because it appears in the table.
Yeah.
You already have some of that cleanup going on in your definitions.
But yeah, so site coverage excludes attic areas, basement areas, and sheds under 200 square feet, and farmers porches, which are very important to exclude those. So site coverage, no basements, and then when I go to GFA,
Yeah, you have to,
unless you got their Henry Paul, gross floor area. It shall include all areas capable of being used for human occupancy, including all basement floor areas. That says all basement floor areas, not finished basements, mezzanines, attic spaces, and enclosed porches.
Because it's not, that definition of gross floor area is not connected to how we do site coverage.
So it's kind of,
Well, it's in there as a general definition of what gross floor area is.
So in the column, but it's saying maximum GFA.
I know, yes, I agree. It's not consistent. But we don't calculate site coverage the same way we define a gross floor area, so that's an inconsistency.
okay, well, let's look to see, when we come back to it, we'll look to see if cleanup. Is there any other?
The other issue I have is that my belief is that when we applied the percentage of development based on your lot size, you can do 15%, 10%, 20%. The number goes down as your lot gets bigger, which is understandable. But the way it's set up right now, like when we look at the chart that Paul sent out, that it's, lots under 10,000 square feet, let's say, you can do an average increase of 20%, let's say. My view is that we're rewarding the most, whoever's in violation of the zoning the most gets the biggest reward. That there's one thing to apply. See, I think when we created that table, here it is here, 20%, 15%, 13%, of maximum site coverage, which is fine to apply it to the maximum site coverage to say, if you have a small lot of 10,000, you can go to 15%. But then to also take that 15% and say, if your house is non-conforming, you can add 15% more. Well, if my house is only non-conforming by 1 square foot, and your house is non-conforming by 500 square feet, we're rewarding you for that. So it's like so when I was talking to Bob about, Bob Shelton about this a year ago, Bob was complaining about it, and I said, Bob, no, the person with the house that's in violation to the highest degree has the highest potential redevelopment, can get redeveloped to a higher, to even more. But to me, it's like, if you're already breaking the zoning, we don't reward you even more than the guy next door who wasn't breaking the zoning.
Are we proposing to give 20% to each person based on their current situation, or are we saying that you get the 20% over the average as a threshold for not going for a special permit? See what I mean? So if you're already 500 over, you might still be over with I'm looking at like the 40K lot, 20% site coverage increase of 5.6. If you're already 7%, you still have to go for a new special permit.
That's the way it is right now. If you are already non-conforming to the site coverage, you need a special permit to go whatever your percentage is based on your lot size. So if you're on a 20,000 square foot lot and you're already over the site coverage limit in this chart, you can get a special permit to go 13% of whatever your lot, 13% of 20,000. That's your limit.
Sort of correcting.
Hold on.
No, it's 13.
I've read someplace where that you can make your current house bigger.
Paul, can you just explain that one more time?
So on page 82,
Yeah,
pre-existing non-conforming structures may expand by multiplying the max site coverage percentage corresponding to the size of the lot which the structure is located. And then the example is
Page 84%.
you have a pre-existing non-conforming house at 3,200 square feet on a 10,000 square foot lot. When you go to the chart, your max site coverage for a 10,000 square foot lot is 15%. So you could do 15% of your lot size, which gives you an expansion potential of 480 square feet.
And that's my point, is that if I had a smaller house that was just barely breaking the rules, I'm only allowed to increase by 15%. So if I'm at a 2,000 square foot house, I get to increase it by 200 square feet or 300 square feet. And if we're both on the exact same lot, but your house is bigger than mine to begin with, you get to make it even bigger than I can. Your expansion is bigger than my expansion. And to me,
If you're pre-existing non-conforming, that's it.
no, I'm saying that we created this table and applied it to 2 different instances. because I think I remember when this happened that when we created this table to talk about the maximum site coverage, that's related to the size of your building relative to your lot. And that's fine, whether we agree with the numbers or not. But then to take that table again and say, now, instead of applying it to the lot, we're going to apply it to your house and say, you can increase your house by this amount. In one case, it's this maximum site coverage is a ratio of the lot size, and then we're applying it later on to the ratio of the house. That's bad engineering. That's not, you're taking a table that was created for one purpose, and for expediency, you're applying it for a second
And
purpose.
so,
And when I read that at first, I'm like, this makes no, and this is what,
So-
this my brain breaks my brain.
you can correct me if I'm wrong, but we get this table. And then the pre-existing non-conforming came out, and there was very strong arguments at this table that we can't be too onerous on the pre-existing. We don't want to get into legal trouble. We don't want to do this and this. So
I know.
this is not linear in your thinking, but I'm telling you, that line was the compromise.
Might have been.
And it was a compromise to try to figure out, because we were running numbers about who in the pre-existing non-conforming would be impacted. And there was a group of about 250 people, which on the face of it looked like they would be exorbitantly impacted. And there was sort of a response and workaround. Now, you're saying the workaround is inconsistent, so I think we should.
Yeah, I'm
examine that.
I'm agreeing with making a concession that if someone's house is already big, they didn't do it, but they've owned it for 10 years and now they want to do something like add that second bathroom. I think we make accommodations to allow them to do that. But the way we've done it, we are rewarding the biggest,
The folks that are putting big massing structures on small lots.
yeah. You're allowing the big house on a small lot gets to be even bigger than the moderate house on a small lot.
Okay,
That to me is just proof that it's broken.
so do you have a recommendation?
My recommendation would be, as we get to the, that small additions of 100 square feet to 200 square feet to get approved administratively, because that's the idea of I need to add a breezeway or an entry hall or a bathroom, because I need a first floor bathroom because I can no longer go upstairs. I can't walk up the stairs anymore. Those types of things, I think we would let come in. And then other than that, they go to ZBA and say, here's why I need to make it bigger. I have an extenuating circumstance. But I think automatically just allowing someone to make on a 10,000 square foot lot, they're already overbuilt they're on 9,000 square feet. They got a big ass house near the bay and they're dense neighborhood. We're talking about massing, talking about people don't like houses that are so close together. Yet the way this was created, we're allowing them to have the most leeway.
Yep.
That's my point. So,
I think that's a valid point.
There is an exception already for 200 square feet or less of site coverage is exempt from site.
yeah, I thought there was.
But no, you're right. It's one chart for two different purposes.
Right.
We have to have some accommodation for pre-existing,
Oh, I agree.
but yeah, it
But it might be
could
different.
something else.
It could be something else.
So two quick questions just to help think about this over the next week. The numbers in here in your memo, for instance, on the 20K lot says current average site coverage. That's not the current requirement. That's just based on the numbers, what you're seeing.
That's from the big spread.
Okay. And then the other question, kind of relating back to the planning board discussion about how hard it is to prevent houses like the Shirtlift house. They were clearly over the required site, the max site coverage. Why didn't that allow them to stop and downgrade the house? What's the difficulty in?
I don't.
Are these?
They weren't over the cut max. They were over the trigger for review.
There was 17% based on the property card that I was looking at. Or no, based on your spreadsheet. It's a 27,000 square foot lot, 4,600 square foot house,
Which Shirtlift are you talking about?
200.
The big one, same one Velma had mentioned.
So, but the planning board was saying how hard it was because it was just too subjective to downsize and to impose anything, which I don't understand.
What was the numbers that you just said?
So on the property card, 27,000 square foot lot,
Mhm.
and the house is 4,600 square feet. And on your table, on the spreadsheet, it was showing a 17% site coverage. It looks like with our current requirements in the table, it's 13% is the max site coverage. So they would have had to go for a special permit. And I'm not sure why
The max site coverage is not supposed to be eligible for a special permit unless there's a hardship.
Hmm.
I mean,
so somehow they got it approved if I'm
How did-
reading the
how did-
numbers
how
right.
did
Maybe
that
I'm not
happen?
reading it right, but
well,
I'd have to look at what the file said for what their numbers were for their project,
yeah, I was just looking at the property card.
right? But that's not what, yeah, I'd have to look at the application.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
What the
yeah.
proposed numbers were and what.
Because I'm curious in terms of, do we need to do something else that allows the planning board to enforce this better if they're saying they can't enforce it?
well, it gets,
No, the whole thing, I mean, that chart is the hard max. Can't go over that.
but, I mean, one of my takeaways from that meeting, the gap, I think, in some of these charts is the property that might be twice as big as anyone else in the neighborhood, but comes in five square feet below the max, and it doesn't go to site plan review. We're gonna have to leave.
Yeah.
I threw out a crazy item, just people, I said to that issue of all the properties we're missing. And the question of if something gets too big, at what point do we limit it or modify it? And random question, what if you wanted to increase your house by, take a percentage, 40%, 50%, regardless of pre-existing or whatever, you need a special permit. I mean, do we put a line? You need a special permit. And so it mandates site plan review. But to Dan's question about, well, what can we do? Legally, on a special permit, you can deny. It's not like you can condition, you can deny. So if we were to calculate at some level of expansion that we want to say, there's going to be eyes on it, and the board who has eyes on it has the legal ability to deny it, not just conditioned it. It doesn't mean we've mandated anything, but we've empowered or taken away the concern that they don't have legal authority or it's ambiguous. I throw that,
And I'll throw that counterweight to that, because I don't know the answer for this one either. That gives greater strength to the ability to say no if that's the answer, but it would still need to be based on something measurable.
oh, yeah,
That to me is,
Well, let's see.
you've heard me
Yep,
go
I
on
know,
this
yep.
forever. That what I would view as too large,
Yep.
and someone else will say is just
Yep.
perfect for me.
Yeah.
And how do you define characteristics of a neighborhood?
Yep.
Change, that's the issue. I
Yep.
mean, that's a tool, it's wonderful. But how to get there?
No, I know. Well, we're gonna discuss this at length on the night. And-
With shots.
Okay,
Jackie can,
Yes, yeah.
email, data
So the
before next meeting.
spreadsheet that Paul sent out that I put together about the last 3 years of site plan review numbers there's been some cleanup since that went out yesterday, so I will send you a fresh one if you would like.
Oh, did you send it out?
I didn't see it.
I
No, I
really,
didn't.
Okay,
No, no one's seen it yet.
I will send this to you if you would like it on paper.
I need it on paper.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's what I did. I know.
Okay, and Paul, do you have I've tried to look at the Excel spreadsheet, it's just not my thing. Do you have that on paper by any chance?
Well, it's 4,000, 5,000 lines of it.
You know,
Yeah.
Comes bound.
this one's only 30,
What's that?
this one's only 35 lines.
Yeah.
No,
I
but
because I don't think I went through it.
This summarized.
That's the summary, okay.
But if
All right.
someone,
No,
it's
well,
in here, someone with a better mind than mine to do this stuff, that's what you have. The spreadsheet, you can,
I would say the policy, just to graphically show things, because I can barely speak English, but I do understand imaging and how numbers work. I think our goal should be to look something like a curve that flattens out and plateaus for site. So as you're looking at how big your house is versus how big your lot is, and whatever the cap is, we have it at 6,000 square feet, which I think we all think is wrong. But I think the way we are set up right now, that we don't have this linearity here at all. We have this sawtooth all the way up, because my lot's 10,000 square feet. My lot's a little bit bigger. So it's like, so it's going to go up and then down and up and down. So every lot has a different, develop. I think we can go for just the straight FAR, which is the floor area ratio, and have that across everything, and make the number small and say, let's get the houses all small, whatever the developable piece of your lot is, they all shrink together, as opposed to right now, some lots are going to lose a lot in value and other lots are going to gain in value by having different set points all over. We have 6 different set points along here. So if I have,
Well, and I will tell you, when the charts were originally being done, we went back, Jim went back several years and Paul went back to look at what was the average. And what we found was planning board for many, many years was approving projects that were on average about, I remember the number, about 11%. And then starting just the year after COVID, it spiked. So then it was like 12, 14, 15, it just really went up. So we were in this chart trying to reset it back to that. There was a lot of compromise math here, but I'm just saying we were trying to set back an average.
yeah. The other thing that rubs me the wrong way is that I can have a lot at like 999 square feet, and my neighbor has 10,050 square feet, and I can develop a bigger house than he can, because I have a higher ratio. Now I got 999 times 14% versus 10,002 times,
Well,
where it steps down. So you end up having, instead of having a smooth line, you end up having this jagged sawtooth line. That's all. I'm just saying it's something for us to think about for a week.
Yeah.
I don't have a solution. I'm just saying things that when I'm going through this,
there's an unfairness kind of built into the whole pre-existing non-conforming to begin with, just because you're already breaking the rules, and I can get a special permit to do my addition and break the rules and bend the rules further. Whereas now I'm next door, my house is completely conforming, and I have to get a variance and jump over a whole higher hurdle and prove a hardship. Whereas the guy next door, there's always. I'm saying that's.
We're not going to get to.
If I can improve that and lessen that, but that's the funny thing about the zoning is the person who played by all the rules has a harder pathway to do the same thing as his neighbor did.
can you remind me what triggers, non-conforming was at a certain date, 1988, when we, changed
No,
everything.
it's 2 dates. Because you asked me that question last week. I couldn't answer it. So I had to study it.
There's 2 dates.
Yeah, we went from 20,000 to 30,000 for 1 year, then
40,000. So what is that, does non-conforming stay in perpetuity with the lot? Or if you've bought, you've sold, you've torn down, like at what point, like if.
Sorry, Mary.
Go ahead.
There's a loophole that if you have a lot that's been in a approved subdivision, so there are 20,000 and 10,000, maybe not 10, but there are 20,000 square foot lots in town that have been pre-approved. They're inside of a subdivision.
I got 2 next to me that are building.
What's that?
2, I'm in a subdivision.
Okay. And those ones have preserved their rights to be developed. But if someone just had a 10-acre lot and they want to subdivide it, they can only go 1 acre at a time now. So there are those bluebirds floating around town that might be your next door neighbor who can develop on a smaller lot if
it's a pre-approved subdivision.
the word subdivision. I might retract the word subdivision, but if it's a pre-approved lot, there's something in the very first paragraph of
It's a lot.
that paragraph you were asking me to read last month, and I had to reread it 3 times.
No, but so my basic question, let's say you're outside a subdivision, you're on one of these lots. At what point if I bought a small cottage, but it was on a lot that was zoned for something, but I've changed ownership, ownership doesn't change it, correct? The zoning is carried with the land.
Change of use sometimes changes it.
Change of use, you abandon things for 2 years, I thought.
So we don't the bylaw, what Martin just said, that just because you're on a non-conforming lot doesn't trigger you to go to zoning board. It's what you're doing on the lot. It's a dimensional conformity. So that's a carve out that's always been on the books. Cause some towns like minimum lot size is 40,000, you're on a 20,000. No matter what you do, you go to zoning board. Even if everything you're gonna do on the site is gonna conform to all today's setbacks and everything, the fact that you're on an undersized lot, you go to the zoning board, you have to get a special permit. We don't do that in Eastham.
And that's kind of a problem, given that we've got like huge percentage of non-conforming.
80%, yeah.
Yeah, 80% of non-conforming. So one of the things we may need to look at is that carve out.
There's also the argument that when they were built, they were conforming. It's you, the town, that made me non-conforming. I didn't do anything that made my house.
Well, every zoning change we make falls on that same legal argument. But I mean, if the goal is we're still getting too big houses that are too big on small lots.
Yeah, I mean, that would be a pathway to what your suggestion was, that if you're on a non-conforming lot for just the pure size of the lot, no matter what you're doing,
You get a special
go to a
permit.
special permit for whatever the project is, even if you're gonna conform to all your setbacks and your height and your site coverage.
Well, you know,
Your lot size is
yeah.
under.
I mean, I was thinking about the example of, came at the orientation where they were like, 100 square feet less, and then they didn't have to do any review. And the notion that pick a number, if expansion, you trigger expansion over 50% would need special permit. Might that change the behavior that everybody will come in with 45% expansions? I mean, people who want to avoid things, we kind of de-incentivize them or incentivize them to go a little smaller, but whatever. I've said this 2 times.
Throwing the neighborhood averages concept, which applies.
So
The current neighborhood average or the
well,
current
that was,
site coverage for that size lot.
I know, that was the debate. Okay,
One last topic, just to tee it up for next week. Are we all in favor, is there a consensus that 6,000 square feet is too big, that we want to bring that number down significantly as an overall size? And I guess before I ask that, is there a consensus that we don't want to count basements towards that 6,000 feet? Or that we're going to count basements in any context when we're talking about massing and neighborhood feel?
well, we had a very strong recommendation a couple of years ago that we should exclude basements because we looked
should
at
what?
exclude the basements because it was a workaround on too many things. Cut your property by 1,000 square feet. All right, we'll take the basement out. I mean, and we saw a lot of case law, like this is happening all over the Commonwealth. I want to do 4,000 square feet of renovation, including my basement. You can only do 3. All right, I'll take the basement out. So we saw all of that stuff, and that's why we eliminated that.
Because in my mind, I would feel that if you're not counting my basement, instead of my building a 5,000 square foot house, I might be happy with a 4,200 square foot house because I know in the future I can do whatever I want in my basement without coming back to planning. So I'm saying that by not counting basements, we might actually make houses a little bit smaller because there won't be the pressure to, I'm going to build the max to what I can build right now because I'm going to the property.
That was the intent.
Yeah.
Eliminating basements and exempting the 200 square foot shed was the offset to putting limits. I mean, there was sort of I don't want to call it political, the community pressure of how far can we go with some of these limits? And there was an offset to try to give more flexibility, but have maximum. But because of pre-existing and because obviously, as you pointed out, the way we've written pre-existing, we didn't achieve the goal of really having maximums when you've got 80% of the town being on pre-existing. So there was some inconsistencies in terms of the compromises we came up with. But in any event, Kevin's got his hat on, so he's out of here.
We've been trying to save everything for next week, and we dove right in anyway.
Well,
It mostly gets people thinking. That's all.
No, to try to address your 6,000 square foot house question. You need a lot of 50,000 square feet to build on it. I don't know how many lots in town are 50,000 square feet.
170 or something like that.
It could be a lot.
Not a lot.
Wow, it's a lot.
Thing I would ask you to
Um,
think about in that is site coverage versus the size of an individual unit, because those larger sites are where you can put more than one dwelling. So if we only talk about it in terms of limiting site coverage, then on my 3 acre lot or my 2.5 acre lot or whatever it is, I can't build 3 2-bedroom homes to rent out to year-round residents.
You could never do that on your, on your 3 acre lot.
Just without having all the numbers in front of us, right? Just to think about those lots that are over 40,000 square feet are the lots that are also allowed for things like duplexes and, or to have 2 dwellings, ADUs, have room there. So just, are there then carve-outs, exemptions, language provisions
I see what you're saying.
to address
So-
the difference between total site coverage and individual
Okay.
building size?
So you're saying it might be, that 6,000 square feet might be divided between 3 residences on a 1.5 acre lot, which we might say that could be a good thing, because we created 3 housing units of 1,950 square feet each, which would be pretty nice size. Okay,
But again, they can only do, right now, our zoning only has duplexes. And what we've kicked to the spring is the
Duplex with an ADU.
duplex with an ADU, but we've kicked to the spring the multifamily stuff. So there's intersections with a lot of this stuff. So anyways, okay. Can I get a motion to adjourn? So move second?
Who's gonna second? Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Uh,
Thank you, guys.
thank you.